You may already be familiar with. It's quite well known. It's called the Good Samaritan, and you can find it in the Bible book called Luke chapter 10, verses 25 to 37. And in it, Jesus was asked by a Jewish man who was an expert in the law how he can get to heaven. And as their conversation continues, they settle on these commandments that God gave to his people, which we can find in the Old Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind. Also, love your neighbour as you love yourself. Now, before we go any further, I've got some helpers who are going to come round and hand out some bookmarks, because we want that to be a verse that you are reminded of this week, and also it reminds you to be praying for our citywide partners. And if during the next kind of 10 minutes while I'm up here, you would like to colour in that Bible verse, please come and help yourself to some crayons down the front here. Any age, you are very welcome. You can come and grab a handful if you want now and take them back with you. But don't worry about moving around in front of me. That's fine. So I'm going to read it again. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind. Also, love your neighbour as you love yourself. Now, love is more than a feeling or emotion. And we all give and receive love in different ways, don't we? Using our time, our words, and our actions. Now, I would like a little bit of interaction. So turn to someone near you, or if you want, you can just think to yourself for a moment. What are your favourite ways to show or receive love? What are your favourite ways to show or receive love? You've got 1 minute. Okay, good chat. I can hear a lot of hubbub in the room, so I think seems like it was something fairly easy for you to talk about today. So you might be familiar with these verses that are also in the Bible that are often shared at weddings about love. It's not specifically talking about weddings, just to be clear, but this is one that's often known because weddings are about love, aren't they? So here we go. Love is patient. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous. It does not brag, and it is not proud. Love is not rude. It is not selfish, and it cannot be made angry easily. Love does not remember wrongs done against it. Love is never happy when others do wrong, but it is always happy with the truth. Love never gives up on people. It never stops trusting, never loses hope, and never quits. So let's bear this in mind as we think about the rest of the story that we've heard. So next, the man asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbour?" And Jesus tells the story of a man who was heading from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked and robbed. Injured and alone, he sees a priest coming. But as the priest draws closer and sees the beaten man, he crosses over the road and walks on. Next, a Levite comes along who was another religious official. But he also crosses the road to avoid the injured man. As religious leaders whose role was to help people to worship and draw closer to God in the temple, we might be quite surprised that they hurry on by. What do you think? Yeah. What reasons might they have had for not stopping to help then, I wonder? Here's a list that I've had to think about this week. The road is too dangerous for me to stop and help him. He might be a decoy for an ambush. I'm in a rush to be somewhere. I've got to get home and see my family. I just don't know first aid. He brought it on himself. He shouldn't have been on such a dangerous road. I'm only one person and the job is too big. He didn't ask me for help. I can pray for him. Do any of these resonate with you? Have you ever thought these before? I know I have. And then Jesus continues and we meet the hero of the story, the one who demonstrates love and empathy. Now, the Jewish listeners might have expected Jesus to say next that an ordinary Jew came along. However, Jesus shocked them by saying that the man who helped was actually a Samaritan. And we'll come back to why that was a shock a little bit later. But instead of passing by, the Samaritan stopped, tended to the injured man's wounds, transported him to safety, and paid for his stay while he recovered. Here we see love in action. The Samaritan didn't just feel sorry for the man, he acted with kindness and with generosity. It wasn't enough to just see the man's need or feel sympathy. The Samaritan allowed himself to be moved by the man's pain, a pain that wasn't simply someone else's responsibility, it became his. So Jesus ended the story by asking the expert, who was the neighbour to the injured man in the story? Was it the priest, the Levite, or the Samaritan? It's kind of obvious, isn't it? Jesus said, which one of these three men do you think was a neighbour to the man who was attacked by the robbers? And the expert on the law answered, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, then go and do what he did. Today, we face the same opportunity as we look around and see people in need. This morning, we've heard from three representatives of three different organisations based in this city who support a growing number of people in our communities who are without a safe and stable home, who are struggling financially, who are experiencing pain and brokenness. Families, young people, children, people of all ages who are caught in a cycle of poverty or the ongoing effects of conflict in our world. And it can feel overwhelming, can't it? We might wonder, what difference can I make? And the truth is that it's tempting to just pass by, like the first characters in Jesus' story, to hear the statistics and feel totally powerless, to just scroll past the suffering, to list all the reasons that we had on the screen before, some of which are entirely legitimate in certain circumstances. But the story of the Good Samaritan reminds us that compassion begins with one act of mercy and kindness, with one person seeing another person as a neighbour. Jesus calls us to see people like he sees them, not as problems to be solved or statistics to be managed, but as beloved children of God. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. Now, this doesn't mean running after every single need that might present itself. After all, the Samaritan didn't establish a hospital for unfortunate travellers. But perhaps there are people that you notice, maybe even coming into your mind now, with needs that you can help with, where you can have compassion. I stumbled upon this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that felt really apt. He said, I imagine that the first question the priest and the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But by the very nature of his concern, the Good Samaritan reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Now, I mentioned that the Jewish people listening to the story would have been surprised that the hero of the story was a Samaritan person. Why? Well, The Samaritan would have been the last person that the Jews would have expected to help, because although they lived geographically really close and had roots in the same God, the Jews and the Samaritans had fallen out over religious views that caused separation between their two communities that had lasted hundreds of years. Could it be that Jesus wanted to point out that our neighbour is not always a person from a radically different culture or country that is the hardest for us to love, but actually the someone just down the road who has a different opinion, language, or way of life to us? The Good Samaritan wasn't hindered by the fact he was different. He simply had a heart to make a difference. He was willing to cross political, racial, cultural and social barriers and prejudices because he saw someone with needs and had the resources to help. God's love crosses boundaries and social expectations too. And if you want any examples of that, have a read about Jesus' life in the second part of the Bible. There's lots. As Christians, we're invited to respond to the needs of people around us with both prayer and action. Prayer isn't a bad thing, just let me be clear about that. Prayer opens our hearts for God's compassion, aligning us with his love for those on the margins. But prayer also moves us outward, calling us to act. We can support local charities and organisations offering practical help. We can be advocates raising awareness of the needs in our communities. We can show kindness, listening, speaking with respect, and remembering that even a simple act of care to someone that we meet can reflect God's love. The story of the Good Samaritan ends with Jesus saying, "Go and do likewise." And that command still speaks to us today. My prayer is that we would become people who see those who are struggling, become people who refuse to walk by, and who show God's love in all the ways that he created us to. So, over to you now. I've got some questions for you to have a little think about. And again, you might want to have a chat with people around you, or you might just want to have a think to yourself. And we're just going to do this for a couple of minutes. But here are some questions that will be on the screen as well. When have you helped someone who wasn't your friend or was different from you? And how did it feel? Has anyone ever shown this kind of care for you? And what happened? Who are the neighbours in your life you sometimes ignore or avoid? And why do you think Jesus links loving God and loving others so closely? So, a couple of minutes, over to you. Feel free to think on your own or chat with those around you. You might take one of those questions or all of them, and then we'll come back together.